Namibia will have to pay more than $500 million in duties if the country has not signed an economic partnership agreement with the European Union by January 2014. The EAC's adopted a proposal, or rather the EC's adopted a proposal last week to amend the Market Access Regulation of 2007, which has been governing EU imports of 36 African, Caribbean and Pacific countries. Okay, let's see whether or not the Namibian government is going to give in to the pressure. We're heading over to our NBC studios in Windhoek. We're speaking to Daniel Motinga, who's an economist at FNB Holdings. Daniel, thanks so much for your time. It's a very controversial proposal that's come through from the European Commission. Duty-free quotas to be removed unless Namibia subscribes to a new trade protocol. Will Namibia subscribe?
I think good question. I think thanks for having me, Lerato. I think the issue is, as you know, this issue has been dragging on for some time. Namibia ultimately would subscribe. I think all parties will have to come to a table and agree on some of the things that that are non-negotiables. From Namibia's side, or mostly from the developing country side, I think the issues pertaining to intellectual property rights, the issue of infant production, those are some on the developmental agenda pertaining to the agreement. I think that those are some of the bottlenecks that have been hamstringing the signing or the non-signing of the agreement thus far.
But from the EC side, it seems a bit like a shotgun approach. Unless they sign by January, duties on some preferred goods would be removed. It almost seems as though Namibia doesn't have a choice, because if they don't comply, they're going to be losing on average 58 million euros per annum in duties that they have to pay.
You know, it's true. I mean, but remember, you should understand the political economy against these things, because it's purely, of course, the EU, the EC, I can imagine, is a bit fed up of the process has been dragging for some time. They haven't made many headways of the South Africa discussions as well. So, I mean, but the politics around it is that, you know, it seems from the perspective of countries like Namibia that they fear that they will have to give up more because of this whole reciprocity challenges in terms of giving access to the EU markets, EU products to South Africa and Namibia, and that may outcompete, you know, the local produce. So I think the debate is stuck somewhere there as to what is the way forward. But I can imagine, you know, there's frustrations at both sides of the ocean, but I'm sure they will come to some solution in the long run.
Now, these economic partnership agreements have been fairly controversial generally. There are some countries within Southern Africa, within SACU, who want to assent to it. And then there's a big country like South Africa that's reticent. And Namibia is caught somewhere in the middle. Basically, what is it that the Namibians want?
I think you must position or posit this whole debate of the EU, you know, ACP, or, you know, the whole EBA debate against the context of, you know, the EU SA TDC. Remember that TDC excluded SACU members. So in a sense, indirectly, South Africa had to negotiate, you know, on behalf of the SACU stakeholders. And, you know, if you look at that, the likely impact of that agreement, the SA South Africa TDC, it will have huge repercussions if it eventually is implemented maybe by 2012. On you know, SACU earnings for Namibia. I mean, that's a third of government revenue. So that's the background, some of the background challenges that informs the debate surrounding the signing or the non-signing of the EPA. So for Namibia, I think the view is, you know, unless some of these developmental issues are resolved, and I think they have to support the South Africans, the broader civil society on that. Unless those developmental issues are resolved, there's no talk going forward. Again, you must understand that the greater policy nexus of the EU comes from, is particularly on the agricultural side, is informed by the common agricultural policy with high subsidies in favor or in support of the agriculture sector. So these are some of the nuances that the making debate or the progress are quite complicated.
I'm glad you mentioned the agricultural question, because some people are saying, well, you know, we're arguing about beef and grapes and fish. Namibia must simply diversify its export component. I mean, ultimately, they're going to be competing with producers from South America, from other African countries. They shouldn't be squabbling over this thing. They should just produce something different to sell to Europe.
Well, it's a fair comment. I mean, but remember, you don't change your production systems overnight. And clearly, agriculture really for Namibia, it's about 4%. So it's not the mainstay of this economy. but it has been quite profitable, you know, depending on what the exchange rate was, to export, particularly for local producers to export to the EU. So it's been a quite profitable market in the past. It's now with the change of events on the exchange rate side that the market is probably not as competitive as South Africa. So, I mean, what we are saying is we shouldn't forget that South Africa is also one of our big trading partners in terms of agricultural exports. Most of our live exports of beef, goats, sheep, mutton goes to South Africa. So in Namibia, earlier you alluded to this whole COMESA negotiations. I think it's all to do with diversifying the market away from the likely impact of the EPAs. But having said that, I think I still view that in the end there will be agreement reached. January 2014 is now the new deadline, but I suspect by then we would have probably sorted out some of the challenges.
Okay, and finally, in terms of the vision that Namibia has for trade, the relationships it wants to forge, what are the priorities here? Because as you're saying, they're probably entering into talks with COMESA, which is a 19-member bloc, the East African Community. They're involved with a free trade area in SADC. They are in the midst of negotiations with Europe for preferential access. But there's a whole other world out there. What is it that Namibia is trying to accomplish by way of its trade policy?
I think there have been some mixed signals being sent on the trade policies for that, but I think the focus is really SADC. And the focus specifically in SADC is the opportunities that arose in Angola as a result of the democratization of that country. So I think in the medium term, I think it's SADC to see how far you can push SADC. But there are debates, remember, as this whole debate regarding the greater trade liberalization and how it impacts on SACU and what its implications are for SACU, because SACU is a more closer union than SADC. So, but I think the focus in the medium term is to expand opportunities, trading opportunities for Namibian businesses in SADC, and most specifically in the countries like DRC and Angola.